get started because we do have a lot to cover in an hour. There's really not a lot of time. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I'm so excited to see everybody here, and I really hope that everybody leaves having learned something new. So for those that don't know me, I'm Brianne, and we have Plum Fabulous Foods here in Plum. We are an organic farm. We grow organic vegetables and make homemade bread, and we sell them at the farmers markets around this area on the weekends. So we felt inspired to do these classes because we've been on a health journey for the last 10 years. We've got 6 children, and probably about 10 years ago, we started realizing the importance of feeding them healthy and trying to learn more about how to grow our own food, make our own food, that sort of thing. So we started this series of classes with bread making because that's where our journey began. That's where we started when we wanted to make changes in our diet, was making homemade bread. I was very fortunate to grow up with a grandmother who made bread. She always ground her own wheat. I thought she was a rock star. And so I went and spent a weekend with her, learning her recipe and her methods. And then over the years, I have tweaked it and simplified it as much as possible so that I could work making it into my very busy schedule. So the method I'm going to show you tonight is that method that I've developed over the years. It's our recipe that we use. We make 20 to 30 loaves of bread a week, and this is the recipe that we use. So that being said, if you have any questions, please stop and ask me, because I do this so much I may not think about some things that you guys, maybe who've never made bread or new to it, may have questions that I don't address. So please stop and ask me questions anytime you have a question. So the handouts that you guys have the basic recipe at the top, and we also have a list of ingredients in there that we use. There's more detail on the pages than what I'm going to be able to cover in the class tonight, so you can go home and peruse it at your luxury and read more about the ingredients there. So let's see if my water is ready, and we're going to get to mixing. Okay, so when I make bread, this is exactly how I do it at home. I line my ingredients up because I want to make sure that I don't forget something. And it's kind of like a dance, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I say that because it's very literally, it's 1 tablespoon of salt. So then it's 2 tablespoons of yeast. So I really recommend that, we are so lucky. I used to have to buy this at Sam's. Now it's available at RATV, $2.77, and you get a whole pound of yeast. And you can store it in your fridge, or you can store it in your freezer. Even making 30 loaves of bread a week, this lasts me quite a while. And I promise you, if you bought the little packets, it would cost you way more than $2.77. I think you get 2½ teaspoons in a packet. So this is definitely the best option for buying yeast. And when you look at it in the store, when you feel the package, it needs to feel like a brick. It needs to be hard as a rock. If it's not, if you can squeeze it at all, that means it's been punctured somewhere, it's lost its air tightness, and your yeast might be compromised. So I would not buy that package of yeast. If you're going to buy it in the brick like this, you need to be sure that it feels like a brick until you get home. And I always let my kids help me with this because it's the funnest thing. You cut it, and all of a sudden that air comes out and it just melts away. So for those that don't know much about yeast, we're going to cover the sourdough bread making in the next session, which is next month. This is what a loaf of sourdough bread looks like. Okay, so sourdough bread rises using wild yeast that you've caught from the air. And yeast is all around us. It's naturally present in our environment. Commercial yeast is where they've taken one strain of that wild yeast, and it's a strain that they know that is very predictable. It always reacts at 100 to 110 degrees, and it reacts in a very predictable way, and it makes loaves of bread that are very predictable, and you know how it's going to respond in the bread making process. So that's what commercial yeast is. It's just one strain of yeast. Sourdough bread, you can do the same thing every time, and you don't ever know what you're going to get because you don't ever know what is colonizing your yeast starter at the time when you're making it. So it's very unpredictable. So we've got our yeast. So we got 1, 2, 3. This is our oil. And you'll see I've got everything stored in these kind of containers because I buy everything in bulk. And then I store them in whatever containers I have around the house. There is a listing on those pamphlets that says where I buy my ingredients in bulk. So if you're interested, you can check that out.
What kind of oil are you using?
This is organic cold pressed coconut oil. So I really encourage you to research the oil issue for yourself. I feel like coconut oil is a really great, healthy oil to cook with. I really advise against using vegetable oil or canola oil because those oils are almost always made using genetically modified ingredients and they're really bad for your thyroid function, especially for women. That's something you want to take into consideration. So I would research oils if you're not familiar. That's a great place to start your health journeys, researching oils. So you'll see I put my water in there before the flour. This is the method, the way it's listed in your recipe is the order that I put it in the bowl too. Because if you put the flour in there first and then put the water, when you mix it, there's a good chance that it's not going to get everything on the bottom. And I've done that before, and I'll dump it out to knead it, and I'll realize like there's all this dry yeast that hadn't even touched the water yet. Because it's like the flour that's in the bottom of the bowl. You don't want it to be left behind, especially the yeast. So this is the order I put stuff in, and then I start over. I have 1/4 cup of sugar. This is just plain white sugar. In the past, I've used honey, I've used coconut sugar, I've used several different sugar options. This is what I'm using right now. If you're on a sugar-restricted diet, feel free to use any kind of sugar that is suitable for baking. Okay, then I use a cup of ground old-fashioned oats. And this is what my grandmother swears makes a soft loaf of bread. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I have never deviated from her recipe. She always said she would chummy it up. So she would take it and put it in her food processor and just grind it up. And I've never put it in there whole because I'm just following my grandmother's recipe and that's what she does, so that's what I do. Then I have 4 cups of fresh ground wheat. And I'll show you guys my wheat. You'll see on there, on the handout that you have, there's a discussion about why we use fresh ground wheat. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go check out our blog post about that. We do have a website, plumfabulousfoods.com, where you can go learn more about a lot of the things that we're passionate about, why we use organic ingredients, that sort of thing. So these are wheat berries. Okay, wheat berries are the part of the wheat that we harvest. They're actually the seed. And this is my wheat grinder. So my grandmother actually gave me her version when I started, and I burned the motor up on it because I used it so much. So I got a new one. And I just want to show y'all, you can adjust how fine the wheat is ground here. So like if you're making pasta versus cakes or versus some other things, you can adjust that. And then I'll show y'all how loud it is. And then you just pour it very gently. And let me tell you, if you have a wheat grinder, you want to make sure that this thing is pushed all the way in, or when you turn it on, you're going to have a cloud of dust in your kitchen. So then it just comes out here into fresh ground flour. And I will just say real quick, one of the reasons that we use fresh ground flour is flour is kind of like flaxseed. And when you grind it, it's an oil-based seed, and when you grind it up, it starts to degrade right then. And you're going to lose. Wheat is actually really good for you. It's got all kinds of really great things, vitamin B, riboflavin, lots of really good things. There's a reason they talk about bread in the Bible all the time. It's because it's really good for you. The problem is when you buy flour at the store, it's been ground and it's been sitting there for months or who knows how long. A lot of it's been sifted so that you're losing the germ and the bran and the good stuff. And then because it's been sitting there for so long, you're not getting that nutrient content because it's already broken down. So, and then the other ingredient, the last ingredient, is 4 cups of bread flour. And we use organic bread flour that we buy in bulk. And again, on the last page, it talks about desiccation. For those of you that are not familiar with how wheat and oats are harvested, it talks about why we go through the extra effort to make sure that our oats and our wheat especially are organic. And it has to do with Roundup and the way that they harvest the oats and the wheat. So those are all the ingredients. And then I just set the mixer on and I let it go for about 10 minutes. And so while that's mixing, I'm going to let this mix for a few minutes. I'm going to get a second batch going, and then we're all going to have a chance to knead it. Because the most important thing, I always tell my children, the most important thing when you're cooking is your consistency. So if you're making pancake batter and you follow the recipe exactly, but you go to pour those pancakes and it's sticking to the spoon because it's so thick, there's something wrong with your consistency. It doesn't matter why, it's the way it is. But you know you have to add some milk or water to thin it out, right? Well, it's the same way with bread. If you can just get used to what the bread is supposed to feel like, then when you follow all the steps and all the recipe exactly, you can still put your hands on it and feel it to make sure if it has too much flour, now you got to do something to compensate for that. So I want everybody to have a chance kneading it to see what it's supposed to feel like. So I'm going to let that go for a few minutes, and I'm just going to go through the whole process one more time. So 1 teaspoon salt, 2 teaspoons yeast, 3 teaspoons oil, and just a word or two about the water. Like I said, this yeast only responds at 100 to 110 degrees, exactly. Okay, if it's too high, your bread's going to rise too high and you're going to have a poor end result. If it's too low, it's going to take too low. I talked to somebody this week and she made bread. It took her bread 3 hours to rise. Okay, probably need to check the temperature of your water because it's probably too low. I would use a thermometer. So I've been making bread for like 10 years, and literally 9 of those years I used a thermometer every single time I made bread. I finally feel a little comfortable now that I can stick my fingers in the water. I know my microwave, I know how long it takes, and so I feel comfortable now doing that. So you don't want to use like a body thermometer if you're not very familiar with cooking. This is a candy thermometer, and you can buy these at H-E-B for $1. I also like to use as few measuring cups as possible, so I don't get a 1/4 cup out for the sugar. I just get pretty close, and that's the nice thing about this stuff. It's pretty forgiving.
And that was 8 cups of flour in your bowl.
8 cups total. And you'll see that 4 and 4. That's what I do. Now, if you're wanting to make a white bread, do 4 cups white flour, 4 cups bread flour. I really recommend you sticking with 4 cups of bread flour. Bread flour has higher protein and higher gluten. And those are the 2 components you need for your bread to be able to rise in this whole process. So we're very fortunate now that H-E-B carries organic flours. If you wanted to, there's been times in the past where I've had different things, I call them add-ons. So I used to do like a cup of flaxseed, half a cup of chia seeds, a half a cup of sunflower seeds ground up. You don't want to do too many of those nuts and seed flours because they will change your end results. But you can certainly get away with putting a cup or so in there. Okay. And I always tell my children too, like, cooking is such a great workout. Anybody that thinks that a baker doesn't have a great workout is wrong. All right. So we're going to get to eating this. It's kind of difficult to do a class like this when you have an object that is got so many different components to it, rising times, setting times. So I made this bread earlier so that you guys could see what it was going to look like. I wanted everybody to have a chance to see the bread at all the different stages. This is what the bread is going to look like before you put it in the oven. It says in your recipe that it's going to rise to about 1 inch above the bread pan. So this is what you're looking for. Okay? Just so that everybody knows. And everybody just take and do something like that in front of you. Take the bowls, pass them down. Well, bread has gotten such a bad rap over the years, and it's so unfortunate because, like, literally, I mean, how many times does Jesus talk about bread in the Bible? It can be bad for you if it's in the Bible. So,
Let's make it
Good again.
that's right. That's right. Okay, real quick, for those that don't know how to knead, you want to make sure there's flour on the bottom. Put some flour on your hands and pat it on the top. And then you're going to kind of flatten it out. You're going to take the, let's see, I'm sorry, I had to do it. We're done with it. Okay, you take the front and fold it towards you, like fold it in half, fold it toward you. Then make a 90-degree turn, top, pull it towards you, 90-degree turn, and kind of flatten it out as you do it. It's really important to use as little flour as possible. So does everybody see how it feels? Okay. It feels weird. So you kind of want it to be just a little bit slightly sticky. Okay, if it's sticky, like this isn't like making noodles or some of the other things that you might do. You don't want to just keep putting more and more flour. And when I take it out, I'll let the mixer mix it for the good 10 minutes. And then I take it out and I put it on a floured surface and I feel it for a couple times. But I'm not going to sit there and put a bunch more flour on it and knead it and add more flour. It's going to be good. See, this is actually what you want. Yours is perfect. That's perfect. That's good. See, when you squeeze it, when you go to squeeze it, it's just a little bit sticky to your hands. That's what you want.
Okay, mine's fine.
Yours is pretty good. If you have the brand new one, if you have the one that didn't get mixed in the mixer for a few minutes, the one I mixed by hand, that one's going to be super sticky because it didn't have the mixer sitting there mixing and incorporating that flour. It didn't give the flour the chance to absorb all the water yet, so you are going to have to maybe add some more flour to that, which is another reason I really like letting my mixer do it instead of my hands, because you do have a tendency to add too much flour when you're doing it by hands, because the mixer doesn't care if its hands are sticky. It'll just keep turning. But you, as a person, you're wanting to keep adding more flour. So that feels good right there.
Okay.
And if it, see, that's perfect right there. You want to give it a good squeeze, and if it sort of sticks to your hands, that's when you know it's done. It's perfect. Yeah, see, that feels great. See how light it feels?
Making a ball.
That feels good. Maybe just a little bit
wrong with mine.
But that's just a little bit more, and that's because y'all had that loaf that didn't get You can take the same recipe and turn it into
How come it's sticking to her hand so much over here?
because it hadn't been mixed by the mixer. And so the people that got the fresh batch that I had just did a little bit of this, and they have a lot more work. So Judy, yours feels great.
Are we going to be making videos?
Just a little bit sticky on that one. Like when you squeeze it, and if it sticks and it leaves a residue on your hand, then it's a little bit too sticky. If you squeeze it and it's sticky, but your hands come away clean, you're good. Okay, so anybody that is done, so when I'm done kneading it, we're going to get all this back together, and I put it in a bowl with 1 tablespoon of oil. And then we're going to gather all this back up, pretend it's, you know, obviously you wouldn't divide it 8 ways and then eat it.
Probably not.
It's going to be a layer.
I'm glad you clarified.
Right. Well, actually, it's going to rise one more time, and then you're going to punch it down and you're going to shape it again. So go gather all those up. Then, so I just smushed them all back together. I'm going to put it in here, and I'm going to turn it so that it coats it in oil. Oh, I didn't spill one.
It'll be all right. It's all going to be together.
Oh, that's perfect right there. Yeah, so anybody that had the new loaf especially, you're probably gonna need to wash your hands because I'm sure they're messy unless y'all are just did such a good job kneading.
That's only for me.
This is only for you. I wouldn't. I don't put anything in the machine except my wheat. I might do another cereal too, like a rye or a barley or something, but you don't wanna wash this thing ever. The dust from grinding it keeps all the gears clean. And I've known people that have tried to like clean theirs and they okay. So y'all can go ahead and sit down and we're gonna move on to the next part.
I know.
We got everybody almost back to their places. All right, so after it's been sitting a while, you can see all I did was move this bowl from here to here and it's already starting to fall. This is my children's favorite part to help with.
Thank you.
All right, so this is what it's gonna look like. And go ahead and punch it down.
Oh my! Oh wow!
You can tell I have 4 little boys, and so you can tell that this is like their favorite part. Okay. So after it's risen, we're gonna just after you put it in the bowl like this, you cover it with a tea towel, and that's just to sort of keep the moisture inside as it's rising. You're gonna turn it out, and this makes 3 loaves. Okay. I do recommend using a scale if you're like me and you really want to make consistent bread across the board. If you're not that worried about it, then you can leave this part out. But it will make 3 loaves. Okay. So this basic recipe that you have on the first page, that is a basic. What I make is a wheat bread. It's a basic wheat bread. You can also take that same recipe, and it's what we make our cinnamon raisin swirl bread out of that some of you guys have tried before.
Oh my God, it's
Very, very good.
Saturday.
Yeah, you need to get it.
You can go to our website and reserve it. We do usually sell out on the weekends. So,
We're there at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
8:05.
So I usually spray my bread pans before I start. And again with the oil, I use olive oil or coconut oil in the spray. Again, I would avoid using canola or vegetable oil if you can. So this is it. I divided it 3 ways. Okay, I've got 3 loaves. They all always weigh about 1 pound and 8 ounces. Okay, so when you're making just a regular wheat loaf, I just kind of lay it flat and I roll it up. What I don't want is this on the top, because as it rises, it's not going to have that nice dome shape like you saw a second ago. It's going to be all funky. So I will roll it and try to get some of those seams out and beat it up, because you want to be sure and push all those air bubbles out until it looks something like this. Then I'll put it in my pan, and then I'm going to beat it up some more, and I smush it in my pan. Yeah. You will see finger marks in it if you leave it like that, so I do try to kind of flatten it out. And then to get that nice dome rise on it like you see, I'll push the edges down. Just to force it when it's rising, it's going to rise in that direction. Okay? So again, I just take my loaf, I flatten it out just a little bit, and I roll it into the shape of the pan. See, this one's all ugly. Okay? So I'll just kind of keep turning it and smushing it until I can get some of those, I guess they're wrinkles, I don't know what you call them, but put them like that. Knead it down with my fingers again until it's sort of flat. And then I'll shape it with my fingers to get that rise on it. Okay? So that's the regular wheat bread. And then if you're making cinnamon raisin swirl bread, this is the secret recipe right here. So I roll it out with my hands first.
Oh, let me video that.
Hold
on, let me get
I'm going to smush it out like this, and what I'm doing right now is I'm sort of sticking it to the counter. I don't want a whole bunch of flour underneath it, because when I go to roll it, it's going to roll with me, and we're just going to be rolling all over the place. So I let it be a little sticky on the bottom. I smush it flat a little bit so that it adheres to the counter. And I have measured before. It almost always winds up that it's about 22 inches wide, or long by the width of your bread pan. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be rectangular in shape. And then I use a scant half a cup, so not quite a full half a cup, unless I'm making face loaf, and then she gets a half a cup because she likes extra sugar. And I just spread it with my hands. I do leave a little edge right here where I don't put any sugar because I'm going to roll up from this end, and when I get over here to this end, if it's covered with sugar, it doesn't stick. It doesn't make, and then all your sugar seeps out and it makes a sticky mess on your bread. That happens to a certain extent around the edges too anyways, and you can't fully avoid that, but I do want a good seal on the end. And I just come through, I don't measure this, I look at it.
Cinnamon?
This is cinnamon, I buy this, this is an old container I have from when I bought it in bulk at Costco a couple years ago, and I buy cinnamon from Azure Standard. Everything is cheaper from them, and I can get stuff organic from them that I can't find anywhere else. I used to buy my wheat in Austin in 50-pound bags, and Azure Standard was literally half the price. And like you can see, I ordered 100 pounds of food in January, and it cost me $8 for shipping. So there's no membership fees, there's nothing. It's a family farm, and I'm always about supporting family farms. They have 10 kids. It's their wheat. They grow it there on their farm. So if you guys have any questions, there's a lot of people that order from Azure Standard, and so if I can't make the pickup when they come, I have a friend pick it up, or if she can't be there, then we have another friend pick it up, and so there's a lot of people that go, and it's been a real blessing for our family to be able to buy from them. So I use a half a cup of raisins. Again, organic if you can, because of the chemical residue that builds up in your body from eating non-organic. And it looks like this. It's really important to get raisins on the edges, because for some reason I always try to do that, but the end pieces don't ever have a consistent amount of raisins in it. I try, just so you guys know, to buy it from me, I try. That's right, we save those for the little guys.
Are we going to experience a cinnamon raisin bread shortage now that all these people know?
I know.
Maybe. You better go online and order early.
Hopefully, everybody should be going home and making their own. You shouldn't have to sell any ever again. So, and then you just roll it up, kind of like you're rolling up a cinnamon roll.
They'll see you Saturday. Yeah, we'll see you Saturday. I'll get my order in a moment.
They do. We fall out, and those are the ones we usually like to stick on the end. And then again, I just manhandle it a little bit so that you don't get those air pockets, especially because we have the sugar and the cinnamon in there, so that it doesn't have the stickiness that you have in this loaf. It does have a tendency to want to develop air bubbles as it's rising, so just really beat it up as good as you can. And this one, I just throw in the pan. I don't bother trying to shake it. This one's not going to have any trouble rising because of the way it's rolled. And in fact, I used to, with my wheat bread, I used to roll it out the similar fashion and roll it up so that it would get this nice round shape as it was rising. But again, like I've said, I've just tried to simplify this whole process as much as possible. I used to proof my yeast. So if anybody that's not familiar with how to proof yeast, it's where you would put the yeast in the bowl and you would add the water. Sometimes people add their sugar, and you would watch it bloom. And that's how you would know that your yeast is active. Well, if you make 30 loaves of bread a week, your yeast is good because you just bought it a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago. So if you are at home cooking and you have some old yeast you've had for a couple years, maybe you don't know if it's going to work or not, I do recommend you try blooming it first. So you're going to put it in the bowl and just add that hot water. Instead of doing the 1, 2, 3 where you have the salt and the yeast and the oil and then the water, just put that yeast and that water in there. Give it 5 minutes. If it hasn't changed in some way, if a chemical process hasn't begun and it doesn't look any different, your yeast is no good. Toss that batch, start again. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about blooming yeast and why I didn't do that when I was making mine? All right. So let's see where we are. It's 6:36. In 4 minutes, the bread is going to come out, and we're going to be ready to put. This one's going to be ready to shape and put. So this, you guys can see that this is what it looks like when it's rising, and it'll be like it was when we first put it in there, where you can see about inch above the pans.
How long does it take for that to rise?
This process here is about 30 minutes.
And you don't have to cover it?
You can. I do when I have towels. I don't when I'm busy and I don't get to it. Sometimes I don't get to it. So I don't have enough. I didn't bring enough towels from home. I could probably dig one out, but I don't always do it. So it's not an imperative step. I'll say that. So this process right here takes about 45 minutes. Where from when we kneaded it to we put it in the bowl and turn it in the oil to when it's ready to shape is about 45 minutes, and that's all noted on the papers there. But there are several factors that can affect that. The temperature of your house, the humidity of the air, how warm your ingredients were. If you're grinding your flour fresh, it's going to be warm because it's going to come out of that process, and so it may rise a little faster. If you're using hot coconut oil, like in this time of the year, my coconut oil gets hard, and so I have to heat it up, and so just all those little factors will affect the time. But what you're basically looking for is for it to make a nice round dome on top of your bowl. And again, it's not, bread is so forgiving. And that's why it always surprises me when people tell me that they've tried making bread and they just can't get it, because it is so forgiving. Yeah. Well, I really hope that everybody goes home and tries again. And in the future, if you have any questions, I taught this class about 10 years ago to a group of moms, and I had some women that went home and tried it, and they asked me questions, and their very specific circumstances, we figured out it was probably her oven. And so if you go home and you try it and it's not working for you, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can go to our website and hit the contact me page. So who has any questions? I've been blowing through this as fast as possible because I wanted to make sure and get the important parts covered, which was touching it and feeling it and seeing the process.
I am impressed that you have flour on you. When you watch the cooking shows on TV,
Oh.
they never get messed up.
That's because I am definitely not a professional.
No, you're real. That's
You mean those people aren't really cooking on there?
Not exactly.
So we're not going to get to cook this tonight.
Well, this is all going to get cooked tonight.
But not
Probably not in
Here,
the class.
but yeah.
Yeah, in the class. You should smell our house on Friday.
Oh, I bet it's wonderful.
I can do about 12. Okay, I can do about 12 loaves in 3 hours. And so
Oh,
it's just
okay.
you
A
just
continuous
crank it out,
process.
yeah, all day long so that it's all fresh for Saturday. So when you take it out of the oven, it's really important to put it on cooling racks. I'm a lazy cook. I avoid cooling racks every chance I get because it's one more thing to haul out. I gotta find it and stuff. But don't make that shortcut when you're cooling bread. You definitely want to take it and put it on a cooling rack. And it's really important to pop it out of the pan. If you leave it in the pan, it will, I think it's the oven.
The oven, yeah.
Those are the quietest timers I've ever heard. I don't know how any woman did it.
Yeah, how you hear it.
There we go. I have a timer on my oven that's so loud I can hear it upstairs when I'm upstairs. So, and those are kind of loud. You don't want to leave them in the pan because as they cool, they're going to sweat and condense, and then you're going to take it out of the pan in 5 minutes, and it's going to be all mushy. So pop it out of the pan for sure. So let's talk for a minute about what you want to do with your bread when you get it out of the oven and you're ready to store it. So you may not have 6 children and can eat 3 loaves of bread that just came out of the oven before they go bad. So what you want to do to store your bread, and this is again all in your paperwork there, is for one thing, you don't want to cut it when it comes right out of the oven. Like, who can not want to do that? You're not supposed to cut it when it comes out of the oven because it is harder to cut. It's going to sit there for about 10 minutes, so I'm not ready. Oh, you're going to move it down?
Would you like to do it?
No, you can bring it down here.
The rack is not hot.
Safety first. Safety first, that's right. So you'll leave it sitting on its cooling rack like this for about 6 to 8 hours. You can put a towel over it after it's not really hot to the touch, but I would just leave it open like this. If you're not going to eat it within about a week, I would freeze it. Okay? If you know you're not going to eat it within a week, let's say you're making bread for Thanksgiving 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and you want to save that bread for Thanksgiving. When you make it that day, and you've let it cool for your 6 to 8 hours, go ahead and put it in your bread bags. And I don't have any bread bags with me, but this is, you can see, I buy special bread bags that have a couple perforated holes so that if I happen to make bread for somebody on Saturday morning, it comes straight out of the oven, it can breathe a little bit after I bag it. But just, you can buy these kinds of bags at Walmart. It used to get them at H-E-B, but now you can only buy them at Walmart. They're called twist tie bags, and they're super cheap, and you get a whole bunch of them on a roll. You can also just keep old bread bags that you've saved from when you buy store-bought bread. You can put it in a Ziploc. You just want to make sure you don't squish the bread. My father-in-law got one of those food saver things.
yeah.
They were so enamored with this amazing machine that they put a loaf of bread in there and just giggled with delight as it squashed the heck out of it. So let it cool for 6 to 8 hours, bag it, and then if you're going to freeze it, go ahead and put it into another bag, into like a Ziploc bag, some sort of airtight bag, and do it all on that same day that you make it. Then put it in the freezer. And then to take it out so that you can serve it, just take it out and put it on your counter and leave it closed up and everything. And it's going to sweat and it's going to condense and you're going to think, oh my gosh, that's going to be a mushy mess by the time I get to serving it. Well, the moisture and the condensation that you're seeing is moisture that was present in the bread when you went to freeze it. And you want it to return to the bread or else it's going to be hard and dry. So you want to just let it sit on your counter, don't touch it. Let it come to room temperature. It might take another 8 hours or so. Then you can take that outer Ziploc bag off and then don't touch it. Just leave it. Leave it inside those inner bags. By the next morning, you're going to look at it. It's going to be a dried out loaf. It's going to look just like this. Okay? And the reason that bread gets hard, you really don't want to store bread in the refrigerator. And the reason is because of the chemical process in the way that bread rises and in the sugar. So if you have bread that you want to store in the fridge, it's better to use honey as your sweetener because honey stays in the liquid form even when it's cool and sugar gets hard and it's sort of a complicated process. But if you're ready to serve bread and it's been in the refrigerator for a week and it's kind of hard and stuff, just warm it up. And that the gluten and the sugars will release their chemical bonds that they have and they'll soften back out and it'll be a nice piece of bread that you won't be ashamed to serve on Thanksgiving. So does anybody have any questions about the
I have a
freezing?
question. You're talking about Thanksgiving. What if you wanted to make rolls? Can you hack it up like you did and make little balls?
Yeah, like I said, we make hamburger buns out of it. I make pizza. When I make the sourdough, I follow the exact same recipe and I roll it out in a sourdough pizza crust. I roll it out into cinnamon rolls. You just, it's a very malleable recipe that you can shape and make into anything that you want.
Yeah.
So if you were going to use honey, you're going to add more moisture to your mix.
I would keep it at the quarter cup and you're going to be fine.
Okay.
It's not, the difference in the amount of moisture isn't going to be huge.
Right.
Good question though. Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever freeze the dough unbaked?
I have never done that. You can't. I mean, I know you can buy the frozen dough at the store, but I don't know that I would take the time to thought and finish going through this process. It just never has occurred to me, but certainly worth a try. Like I said, it's very forgiving. I don't know that you're able, because the rising process is so short though, I don't know that you're going to be able to halt that enough when you put it in the freezer and then take it out. I just don't know how that would all work, but it's certainly worth experimenting with. So, and that's a good question too. This is also in that handout. Any commercial bread that you buy has plasticizers in it. And anybody that remembers the big Subway shock that they had found plasticizers in their bread, they've been using plasticizers in commercial bread for years. It's in almost all fast food bread. It's in yoga mats. It's in all kinds of plastic products, and it's in almost every single batch of. When you go to Walmart and they they sell the bread that you can take home and cook, that is going to have plasticizers in it. So even when you're buying the dough from Walmart and taking home and cooking it, when you go to H-E-B Bakery and you're buying their fresh made bread, same thing. It's commercial bread that's been mixed up. It's got the enriched white flour that you want to avoid because the ingredients, the chlorine and the bromine and the stuff that they put in there, you're not doing yourself a huge favor by going to the bakery and buying their fresh made stuff, because it's the same stuff that's in the bag on the shelf. It's just that they bake it fresh right then. So I really recommend, if you can squeeze it in your schedule, to have homemade bread, just to avoid the plasticizers. And so Subway claims now that they have changed their recipe because they were touting this fresh made bread, but they were using plasticizers. There was a contradiction there in what they were presenting to the public.
Where'd you get that fabulous cutting board? Can you see that?
Oh.
Yeah, this
Ooh.
beautiful cutting board was a gift to me from the, his name is Dan. He's the wood guy at the farmer's market in the Grange. He sells handmade wood products. He also made, I bought the spoon from him.
Wow.
He's also the maker of the sauerkraut punches that we're going to be using in our sauerkraut class, because he can custom make anything. And so I brought him mine. I said, I need 10 of these, and he cranked them out for us. He said, what wood would you like? And I said, I don't know, Dan. Pick me out something good. So he makes beautiful products. He's got a website too, if anybody is looking for some custom-made goods. We're really about supporting the other small farms here in America. But, they always talk about how large agricultural operations are what feed the world, and that's really not true, because 80% of America's food comes from small family farms. And so anytime you guys get a chance to support small family farms, I highly recommend that you do that, because they really are what's driving the food production, not only in America, but all over the world. So, yes, ma'am.
You were never fat or anything, but you are extremely skinny now. Is it because you went all organic, or?
Well, we do eat a lot of vegetables at our house because they're free.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I also follow a plan called Trim Healthy Mama, and it's been very successful. It wasn't a huge change from what we were already eating, but it does stress using grass-fed beef or organic ingredients, minimally processed food. So you won't see us eating out very often, and we do make as much as we can from scratch. And if anybody's interested in learning about diet, then I highly recommend Trim Healthy Mama. It's a biblically based diet plan, so it follows, it doesn't follow some of these plans that say cut out this and cut out that, and you can't have this, and it's so confusing nowadays because they demonize everything. And it basically said if God made it, it's good, but there are some certain ways that are more beneficial to your body to eat it.
What is it called again?
Thank you. It's called Trim Healthy
Lots
Mama.
of okra smoothies.
That's right.
Okra smoothies.
I picked 300 pounds of volunteer okra last year, and I probably ate 250 pounds of it just myself. I'm serious. And it's really good for I had gestational diabetes with my 6th baby, and so I became very health conscious at that point. I was really careful with my diet, and that still didn't make any difference whatsoever. Turns out it's stress related, but in the process I did really improve my eating. But we've been all organic for several years now, and anytime you start feeding other people, it really becomes, it's not just my decision about what kind of stuff I want to put in my body, but it's about what I put in their bodies. And I will say that for a family of 8, our monthly food bill is less than $500 a month. We eat 100% organic, and I've got 2 kids that have never been to the doctor in their life. We've never had the flu. They've never had ear infections, and so I really feel like it's worth it. Like the money you're going to save to eat organic is worth it in the long run to keep your doctor bills down. So, but everybody has their own. We're not trying to push our beliefs about that on anybody else. But the main thing, and I taught a gardening class to our homeschool co-op, and I was really surprised even at how much I learned there. But the main thing is that people really aren't educated about their food. That's what we've discovered, and we weren't educated about our food. And over the last 10 years, that's why we're doing these classes. We've learned so much. Like, I was shocked to know that they put plasticizers in all bread. Like, why don't they tell you that? Like, I was outraged that I didn't know that the same stuff that's in yoga mats is in my food. And why does the FDA okay that? And like Roundup, the same kind of thing. They know it causes cancer, but they still allow people to use it. Russia doesn't even allow people in Russia to use it, but it's okay here in America.
They're on an organic push there, and they spray Roundup on the crops right before they harvest it.
Yeah,
That's right.
and
And
I
that's
never
what-
understood that.
It's because crops are easier to harvest.
Yeah,
Cereal crops are easier to harvest when they're dead.
Yeah.
And because it makes the
Yeah.
the seed heads pop and so they get more weight for the bushel when they go to sell it. It's all money driven, it really is. And it's just really important that everybody takes the time to educate themselves because food is medicine.
Well, the biggest reason if we eat bread, it's your bread or something I'm making my mixer. But because I remember as a kid buying bread, and if you didn't eat it in a few days, it was moldy.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
And
absolutely.
now you buy bread, and
Oh,
it's
it sits
good
in the
forever.
cabinet. It never gets mold on it.
That's not our
And I've had people buy our bread at the farmer's market and complain because they set it on the counter and it molded after a week. And I said, that's how you know your food's
It is
alive.
fresh.
It's supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was the same when I started making bread. I didn't have 6 kids at the time, and we didn't eat it all, and I was shocked at how fast it went. I would grow vegetables, and
Same
you'd
thing
pick
with the
them,
vegetables.
and
Yeah.
they're spoiled after 2 days. And I was
Yeah.
like, why? I've got this stuff in the fridge. It's been there for like 2 months, and it looks the same. Like, why is this like this? And so, is there anybody here that doesn't want butter on their bread? Thank you.
Extra butter.
Not like you people over here. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Is there anybody that likes to heal? Some like in our okay. All right. I figured there was a heal button somewhere.
I know.
It doesn't.
There's another deal. Yeah,
There's another
there's more deals. Two in every loaf.
Yes. There you go. Yes, butter is good for you. It's been so good.
Real butter.
We use organic butter. Who was asking about
Yeah,
the
I
butter?
was-
We use organic butter for the same reason that we drink raw milk because it has to do with the omega-3 versus the omega-6 and the amount of. Faith could probably explain all this better than I can.
Yeah, Ralph could explain it a whole lot
But
better.
there's a couple things that if I'm going to eat organic, it's going to be these things. And it's going to be grass-fed meat. And that's not organic, but I want grass-fed meat. I want raw dairy products or dairy products that come from grass-fed cows. Because of the way that things are stored in the animal's body and so that they're concentrated by the time that you get them. And a perfect example, like I didn't know when we started our health journey that 80% of the antibiotics that Americans get are in their food. Excuse me. And that's huge because here we had not been going to the doctor at all for anything. But if we were still eating the 99-cent a pound chicken from Walmart, you're getting a ton of antibiotics in it. And so it was sort of defeating the purpose. And so I would rather eat less meat but eat really good meat than eat a lot of meat and have it be the stuff that's full of that's healthier for you. That's right. And the same thing with bread. Before I started making bread, when I had little kids, we had our first 4 kids in 4 years. So I was like so overwhelmed. And they would come to me and they'd say, I'm hungry. And I would get a bag of store-bought bread and I'd be like, here, eat that. And when we started making when we started making homemade bread, and it had taken me all this time to make it, it was like I would put it on the table at dinner and we'd light the candle and we'd all, oh, Mama made bread. And it was like this special event, and we were thankful for it and we ate less of it because it wasn't like this commodity that we were just throwing around.
Well, but it's more filling. It's got
And
nutrients
it definitely is more
it's
filling,
got
too.
substance
This
to
is a
it.
heal, so you'll have to ask if anybody wants
Who wants
to
to
heal.
heal?
Who wants to heal? And Aubrey, we need to get the next loaves in the. Can you post those in there?
Yeah, I know. Look at that.
Is there how many more do we need? Who doesn't have one yet?
There's 2 people back there.
You count.
3 people back there. There's 4, 5. What do we set the timer for?
So you can see how thick I'm having to cut these because it's hot. So if you had given it a chance to cool like it needs to, then it wouldn't be. You wouldn't have to do them quite so thick.
Why the cooling for so long? That just seems like an exceptional amount of time.
Because you would really be surprised at how long the internal temperature of the bread stays hot. If you were to put a thermometer in the bread, even though the outer part of it feels, and the sourdough bread is even worse. The sourdough bread for some reason takes an exceptionally long time to cool down. And so if you were to bag it before it was totally cool, then 22 minutes. If you were to bag it before it was totally cool, you would see condensation form on the inside of the bag, and then you're going to have that it's gonna roll faster.
Yeah.
And so.
Waiting patiently. Front row, but that's
My
okay.
numbers are slow here. Any more questions? Does anybody have any more questions? I apologize for my hasty letter spreading.
Can we place our orders today for Saturday?
You can, actually, you absolutely can.
You have to go to the website.
Go to our website. You can't get Swiss chard apparently, but you can get the
There's lots and lots of
comments.
lots of pictures on the website. We're adding content slowly, but if you're into gardening, there's lots and lots of garden pictures. We have an online farmers market that you can go each week, and you can't pay online, but you can essentially reserve it. And there's places and there's a couple places we drop off food. You can come pick it up at the farmers market.
And if you have any more questions, please.
What about like a dark red, pumpernickel? Have you ever experimented with that?
I haven't. I don't do a lot of crazy stuff because what we don't sell at the farmer's market, we eat. And so I have found, and we really like to keep it simple. I have experimented in the past. I used to use spelt. I used to use some of the different cereal wheats like kamut and some of the different things that are available. But there's not a huge market for that here in the Grange. And so we just stick to the basics.
It's kind of like Bluebell. We eat all we can and we sell the rest.
That's right. That's right.
So, Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
have you, instead of making a sweet bread like the one you're making right now, have you ever done something savory?
No, like with sausage or some of like cheese.
Cheese and
Oh, like a
garlic
jalapeno.
or sun-dried tomatoes.
No, I haven't. But you try and let me know how it turns out. Again, and in fact, we didn't used to even sell the cinnamon raisin swirl. When we started at the farmer's market, we just sold wheat bread. That's all we sold because that's all I figured there was a market for. And I had been making the cinnamon raisin swirl at home, and I just decided to bring some of that up there, and it did really well. And then we actually at home eat sourdough. It's very gentle on your blood sugar, and like I said, I had gestational diabetes. And so we just transitioned our whole family to sourdough a couple years ago. And so this is a rare treat for them when they get to have the regular wheat because we eat so much sourdough at home. And then I decided to bring some of that up to the farmer's market, and I've actually been selling more of that than I have of the cinnamon raisin swirl lately, which is shocking to me because I'm always like, why do you want that? Like, I mean, it's very good for you, it's healthy, but it's so different. I mean, it's really an acquired taste. And it's just always, like, it took us a year to transition our whole family to it, and it just always sort of surprises me that anybody else will eat that. But they do, and they like it, so we do offer that.
And you're talking about the sourdough.
The sourdough, yeah.
Yeah, it's very good. I just got it from you Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's, I think people think it's not sour or anything. It's
I love sourdough.
yeah, but
it's not as sour. And the thing about sourdough bread is you
so
really
good.
have to know the people that are making it. If you go to Walmart and you buy a sourdough bread and you look on the ingredient list and it lists yeast, it is not a sourdough bread. It has sourdough flavoring. It is not a sourdough bread. A true sourdough bread does not use yeast because it captures wild yeast from the air, and if it's using yeast, then it's a yeast bread and not a sourdough bread, and it's not going to give you that diversity of yeast that's good for your gut. So,
See, my mom had that sourdough starter all the time, so we did biscuits and all kinds of things made out of it.
yeah, and that's what the pioneers use. That's why you always hear about the California sourdough, and that's because 100 years ago, that's what all women used. Back in the biblical times, that's what all people used. They didn't have a commercial where they had isolated the single strand of yeast back then. And so that's what everybody used back then, and it was really good for you. And one of the things, one of the books that really inspired me on my health journey is called Nourishing Traditions, and it looks at all the food practices of indigenous people and traditional groups of people over several hundreds of years. And it's really interesting how people early in man's history naturally learned how things were healthier for them. Like they learned that cabbage would last longer if they fermented it and made sauerkraut. Well, it turns out sauerkraut's so good for you. Same thing with milk being fermented and made into yogurt, and yogurt's so good for you. And they did a lot of those practices to keep their food because they didn't have refrigeration processes, but it also turned out that it was really, really good for you, like sourdough bread, because it populates your gut with the healthy bacteria. And of course, we've only just discovered that in the last 50 years, that's the why behind why so much of that kind of food is good for you. But back then, people just discovered that, hey, they felt better when they ate yogurt. It made their stomach not hurt. It was because of the probiotics that they were getting in those foods. And so, I guess over the last 100 years, people are not as in tune with their bodies. They're not as in tune with the food that they're eating. They're not making it at home like they used to. And so we've lost a lot of these traditional methods of preparing food that were so good for us for so long. And food used to be medicine, and now food can kill you. So it's really worth the time and the effort to take to educate yourself about your food and to really take the time to eat the best kind of stuff you can.
Approximately how much sugar do you put on the cinnamon raisin?
It's a scant half a cup.
Okay.
And again, that's it's very adjustable. If you like more, you can put more. If you're using a sugar substitute, you can use a sugar substitute.
Thank you. I was writing it all out because I didn't see it on.
I hope I've addressed everything. I've been trying to jot things down as I think about it, but so much of this I do without, I don't look at a recipe when I make bread because I do it a lot, so it's hard to remember everything when you're trying to synthesize and put it on a piece of paper. If you don't grind it up like that, you will just see the oat flakes in the bread.
So you use oat flakes opposite whatever flour you use?
I use 1 cup of the ground up oats, and 8 cups of flour. I always use at least 1 cup of the oats. Sometimes I'll increase it, sometimes I'll decrease it to a half a cup, like if I'm running low for some reason, but I always have oats in it. So it's the spelts and the kamutts and the chia seeds and those sorts of things that I don't add to the bread anymore. I've just simplified it over the years. This is what we do. If we were still eating wheat bread at home instead of sourdough, I would still be putting all that stuff in it. But
When it comes to wheat, is there a brand you recommend for someone who can't just immediately?
right, like buy it and grind it on. I am so excited that HEB has organic wheat now. And literally, like, the cost is, I think it's $5 a bag, so it's maybe twice the cost of regular. You're talking at $2.50 more than a regular bag of wheat. If you're not looking for organic, if that's not something that's important to you, then King Arthur is a really good brand. But really, any old batch will do. Like
King
any old
Arthur
kind
makes
of
more
flour.
organic than
What's that?
King Arthur makes more organic.
Oh, do they? Yes, it's hard to find though. You can't always find that stuff. I'm just really pleased that HEB has an HEB brand organic flour available now. And so, if you want to, you can even make mini loaves of this. Like Faith had us make a bunch of mini loaves for a wedding once. And it's the exact same thing as this. You can buy the mini bread pans at the Walmart. They're like 88 cents for 6 or something. And it's the exact same thing. And I'll even do it just like I do a regular cinnamon raisin swirl loaf. Same length. I don't change anything. I just chop it in 3 once I've got it. I try not to make it quite so wide because those pans aren't so wide. But I just chop it in 3 and roll it up and put them in a little mini pan. So you'll get 3 mini loaves of bread from a regular. So if you were going to do a whole batch of bread, you get 9 total.
So you can do your Christmas bread.
You can.
That's good.
Well, again, I'm really glad everybody came tonight. I'm so excited to see everybody go and hopefully make some of their own bread, and let me know how it turns out, and let me know if you have any questions.
We're gonna need some testimonials.
Yes, you do.
When we get it posted on the website, if y'all are signed up for the newsletter, when you get the email for that post, then please go put your comments and let everybody know how great the class was. Let us know how your bread making went.
So, anybody have any other questions? The first time I ever taught a bread class was back when they had a MOPS, the Mothers of Preschoolers group here in the Grange. And it's back when I first started making bread, and I've been doing it for a while. And there's a lot of young moms there, and they wanted to know how to make bread. And so I put a class on then.
And can we go out already and sign up for next month's class?
Yes, just send me an email if you're interested. We don't have an events page. We're kind of low key, you know. But if you're interested and you want to get your name on the list, please sign up. So I had planned on capping this class at 15.
Oh, okay.
And then
Last minute.
yeah, like I just don't want to turn anybody down.
Oh, I know.
I'm so passionate, and thank you guys for being accommodating with our tiny little country church kitchen. I mean,
This is great.
you don't have to worry about getting the floor dirty. Yeah, so if you're interested, just send me an email and I'll get the list started. And those that sign up first will obviously be on the list first. So Cindy, you were asking about the mini loaves. I would go all the way to the end with the cinnamon sugar raisins, and then I would just cut it like this and roll up a mini loaf. And if it was too long like that, I would just go like that, smush it, and yeah, I cook it the same amount of time and everything.
Oh, okay. So it's still 22 minutes.
It's still 22 minutes. So you can see how forgiving this stuff is, because I'm just going to do this. And it's all good. It's all going to rise and taste great. You just smush it a little bit more, and it's going to be fine. So don't be scared of your bread. But you can see how it wants to pull away right there and let all that goodness out. So we don't want that to happen. That's why I leave that gap at the end.
We'd also like to get a group picture if that would be okay.
Yes, let's do that real quick if we can, if you guys don't mind. So I can like prove to my mom that I really did this. People really came.
Be sure and sign up for the newsletter on the website, and you'll get the notices for the farmers market, and you'll also get notifications of the next classes when they're coming out. And there's lots of good reasons to do that. PlumFabulousFoods.com, farmers market, sign up for the newsletter, and look at all those fabulous pictures.